People of Reddit who had intimate encounter with their step-siblings. How the heck did that happen? Story 1. I had two friends. They fell in love after meeting on a drunken one-night stand. They dated for about 2 years and decided to get married. Now, the girl's family was from Australia, so although they'd met each other's parents, the parents hadn't met before the wedding. So, it gets to the actual wedding day. The Australian family is flown in, the English family is there, everyone is sitting down, and the wedding proceeds. Straight to the after party, and unbeknownst to my friends, both sets of parents were in the process of getting divorced. I kid you not, as the meal is taking place, none of the parents are anywhere to be seen. Some of the groomsmen/bridesmaids, and I went hunting for them as the reception was taking place in a huge country villa. Two bridesmaids find the bride's mum and the groom's dad banging in a toilet upstairs, while at nearly the exact same time me and another groomsman find the bride's dad and the groom's mum stoned off their minds and her giving him a blowy in the makeup and hair room. All the bridesmaids and grooms kept it secret until after the wedding, when we found out the others had been cheating as well. Well, we lose our collective crap at how funny it is and tell the bride and groom. They were mortified. They just thought they'd been smoking weed, as the smell was undeniable. Didn't realize their parents had gone full partner swap. Anyway, a year later, both parents have separated and are trying to remarry their opposing number, which will make my two friends' step-siblings twice over. For parents are trying to convince my two friends to divorce so they can get married, and one couple is saying they're going to get married anyway, whether the kids get divorced or not. Before we continue, do us a quick favor. Smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. Our parents got remarried later in life, when we were both already grown adults. We're both only children, so having siblings was a new experience for us, but we wanted it to work if only for the family's sake. In an effort to grow closer, we decided to go drinking one night, a few months after we met for the first time. She ended up crashing at my place. I offered to take the couch and give her the bed, but she insisted we sleep together in that weird feet-to-head setup. My drunk ape promptly went to sleep. I woke up in the middle of the night to find us spooning, and me with a serious stiffy poking her back. I froze. I didn't know how I got there, what was going on, or how I was going to get out of this gracefully. I had just decided to extricate myself slowly in the hopes that I didn't wake her when it happened. Wiggle, wiggle. She started wiggling herself against me. On instinct, I started bucking. There was only one way to go from there. We went out that night intending to become closer. Well, mission accomplished. We banged a few times a week for 5 to 6 months before we both met other people. During that time, we became extremely close. It wasn't just physical, we shared personal stories, our fears, secrets, talked about life, and really bonded as if we were lifelong siblings, except, well, not in the traditional sense. Friends often commented on how close we were, which was ironic considering the circumstances. You'd think that would be the end of the story, but instead of going our separate ways with new people in our lives, we ended up realizing we had fallen hard for each other. Now we're dating and trying to figure out how to tell our parents, family, and friends. Might not have that problem for too much longer, though. The last time her dad came into the living room where we were hanging out. Well, first he knocked. Story 3. Alright, buckle up because this one's a real brain teaser and family tree nightmare rolled into one. I married a lovely widow, beautiful, kind, the whole package. She had a grown-up daughter from her previous marriage, and my dad ended up falling head over heels for her. They got married, which was great for them, but it kind of scrambled things on my end. Suddenly, my dad was now my son-in-law, since he married my stepdaughter. That also made my daughter become my stepmother, because she was now my father's wife. Not long after, my wife and I had a baby boy, which was wonderful, except now my son was technically my dad's brother-in-law, which also made him my uncle. Yep, my baby was my uncle. And since my son was my uncle, that made him the brother of my stepmother, aka my daughter. Which also means he's her uncle. Try explaining that at family reunions. Then my dad and his wife, again, my daughter/stepmom, had a son of their own. That child, due to all the connections, became my grandchild, because he's the son of my daughter. So my wife, who was originally just my wife, is now also my grandmother because she's the mother of my stepmother. Meaning, I'm my own grandchild. And since I'm married to my grandmother, that technically makes me my own grandfather. I swear I'm not making this up. Every time I try to make sense of it, I need to lie down. Story 4. This happened to a former colleague of mine. One night, she got a bit tipsy at an office party and admitted she was in a relationship with her stepbrother. It had apparently started out casually, but eventually became serious. Their parents found out and strongly disapproved, insisting they break up. So, they kept dating in secret. The thing is, her stepdad was a high-ranking executive where we worked, so this wasn't just a private issue, it had office gossip written all over it. Eventually, the parents found out again. This time it became a huge mess. Emotional confrontations, ultimatums, and a lot of public embarrassment, especially for her mom and stepdad, who were well known in the industry. She confided in a few of us that her mom had given her some serious ultimatums, though she didn't share the details. Not long after, she stopped coming to work and emailed in her resignation. Officially, she said she was moving to the US to get away from the drama. She texted a few coworkers privately, saying she needed peace and was done with everything. That should have been the end of it, but a few weeks later, her stepbrother, now ex-boyfriend, began reaching out to her old work friends, clearly desperate. She had broken things off via text and vanished. He didn't believe the whole moved to the US story. Most people thought he just couldn't handle the breakup until he filed a missing persons report. Surprisingly, the local police actually looked into it, rare where we live. They eventually dismissed it as a guy being overly dramatic. But he kept pushing, saying he felt something was seriously wrong. Most of us stayed out of it, again, powerful parents, messy situation, and it all went quiet for a while. Then, nearly 2 years later, out of nowhere, the police came knocking again. Turns out her mother's chauffeur had been arrested for something unrelated and ended up confessing to murdering her. He even took them to where her body was buried. Here's where it gets chilling. The emails, texts, even the breakup, none of it came from her. Her mother had sent them all after she was already gone. She couldn't stand the idea of her daughter marrying her stepson and orchestrated the entire cover-up. There's some speculation that her biological father may have been involved, too. The whole thing felt like something out of a dark crime novel. Most of us were just stunned. I still can't wrap my head around it. Story 5. My mother used to work with a woman who married her daughter's fiancé's father. Let me elaborate a bit on that so it really sinks in. A woman my mother worked with had a daughter who was engaged to someone. This woman was planning the wedding with that someone's father in a Protestant or something church, and while planning, her mother began dating the father. So the father and mother are dating while kids are planning to marry, and they decide to get married before their kids. So they go and get married on a weekend soiree in Vegas. They come back and continue to plan their children's wedding. Their children, who are now legally brother and sister. Awkward, right? It didn't stop there. The church caught wind of the situation and refused to perform the kids' ceremony. The couple tried a justice of the peace next, but that got shut down too. Eventually, they had to leave the state just to tie the knot because the dumb parents couldn't just not get the third or fourth, or whatever marriages performed before their children were happily married. As if that wasn't chaotic enough, the kids did get married and had children. But then the husband ended up in prison for shaking one of the babies, who tragically passed away. He got 20 years. The mom, who married the dad, was horrified, but the dad backed his son, which led to their marriage falling apart. So yeah, a total mess. The whole thing spiraled from some seriously questionable judgment, and it all ended in disaster. Story 6. I'll take things that caused my dad's divorce and destroyed my baby sister's life. $400, Alex. A little backstory. When I was 5 years old, my parents divorced and my dad moved out. For the first couple of years, I was still pretty close to him. He lived around the corner from us, and I was at his house every weekend. Sadly, our relationship pretty much ended when his job transferred him from California to Texas. After his move, I only saw him on holidays. A few years later, he married a woman with 2 daughters around my age. They ended up having a 3rd daughter shortly afterward, and being a resentful 12-year-old living with a rather spiteful mom, I pretty much wrote him off. A couple of holiday visits, and then nothing. Fast forward a few years. I'm 18, my mom married a total a-hole. I have a brand new baby brother, and my home life is miserable. A few days after a violent fight between my stepdad and me, I came home from school, walked into my house, and there sat my dad. I hadn't seen him in years, but he'd apparently moved back to California with his family, and was there to take me to his new house. My mom had called him. She was done with me. This isn't a corn story, so I'm not going into all of the lurid details, but here's the gist. So, I was 18, a decent-looking guitar player, and was angry at the world. My oldest stepsister was also 18, pretty hot, and was no virgin. We hadn't seen each other for years, and before that had only seen each other on a handful of holidays when I was flown out to visit. There was no sibling vibe between us. We were hooking up within a week, and it became a pretty regular, almost daily thing for about a month. And then one day, her mom came home from work early, caught in flagrante delicto. Her mom literally walked into my bedroom and caught us mid-thrust. To say she had an instant meltdown would be the understatement of the century. Items were thrown. Words were said. My stepsister curled into a little ball and tried to wish herself to death. Not that it mattered. My stepmom was clearly convinced that I'd corrupted and probably at her innocent daughter. It was obviously all my fault. Shortly after that, my dad came home. That's when my stepmom decided that I needed to go to jail. She wanted to call the police and have me prosecuted for SA. No Romeo and Juliet laws in those days, kiddos. My dad, to his credit, jumped to my defense and got me the heck out of there. The next day, I was living with my mom again. That situation still sucked, but at least I wasn't being threatened with prosecution. And then the other shoe dropped. My stepsister was pregnant, and neither she nor her mom believed in terminating it. So, I was having a baby. My stepmom flipped out all over again, actually called the D.A's office, and made a more serious push to get me prosecuted. My dad was completely opposed to it. Between the stress of the pregnant girl in the house and that fight, their marriage basically disintegrated. The baby was adopted out at birth, and we mostly went our separate ways. I still see my now former stepsister occasionally. We still share a common half-sister. And we both agree that it was a dumb thing to do, but that our parents, mostly her mom, made the whole thing so much worse than it had to be. We laugh about the stupidity of the whole thing, but there's definitely one thing that we both feel extremely guilty about. Our little sister watched her entire family disintegrate over it. She's 26 years old and doesn't seem to resent us for it. But thinking about that still makes me feel like crap. She was the only one of us that had a shot at growing up in a normal two-parent household, and we took that away from her because we couldn't keep our hands to our sleeves. And before anyone asks, we do not know what happened to the baby. She went to a very good family, but we all agreed that a closed adoption was best for everyone. Story 7. Here's a messy family story I've never told anyone before. So a bit of background first. My mom died right when I was born. She was seriously stunning, like really beautiful, but that's not what this is about, so I won't dwell on it. My dad, on the other hand, had some serious emotional issues and basically bailed before I was born. Because of that, I grew up mostly with his family, which was far from a perfect childhood. Anyways, growing up, there was always this distance between me and my stepsister. Nothing really close or friendly. But when I was around 18, I started noticing she was, well, a total hottie. I don't want to go into too many details about it, but basically what happened is that I accidentally found a video that she made of herself. I knew she didn't make it for me, but I thought she was so frigging beautiful that I watched it twice. I probably would have watched it a hell of a lot more, except that like right around the time I found the video, all this crazy things went down and I had to leave home. My dad's family, who I was staying with, got in bad trouble with the law. I never talk about it. By then, I was definitely lusting after my stepsister. She was also having legal troubles and was actually in custody when I left home. My friend and I went to pick her up from custody. Seeing her that day, after watching the video, I'll be honest, all I wanted was to pound her brains out. Looking back, yeah, it's messed up, but I think she had feelings for me too. When we got her, she kissed me, and it wasn't a sisterly kiss, you know. I mean, it wasn't like ridiculously sensual or anything, but it definitely wasn't sisterly. Afterwards, we went to crash at her friend's place. On the way, my friend kinda hinted he wanted to get with my sister, and I got jealous. Even though she's my sister, I felt like he was competition. Nothing happened between us besides some maybe flirty hugs. Honestly, everyone I knew at that time was wanted by the law, so we were always moving around. It was a crazy, wild time. My friend and my sister never hooked up, but there was definitely some intimate tension going on between them. It was around that time that I got badly hurt in an accident and almost died. While I was recovering, my stepsister showed up and, out of nowhere, gave me this slow, passionate kiss on the lips. Sadly, although I guess for the best, nothing came of it. We spent some time apart, and I started getting really religious, so I tried not to think of her that way. It was actually going well for a long time, like I was totally over her. But about a year later, We were out sailing, not like a date or anything romantic like that, and she showed up in the hottest bikini I'd ever seen. That brought all those old feelings crashing back. Not long after, she got together with my friend, the one I was jealous of before. Not surprised at all. But even after she was shagging up with my friend, there was one time we were at a party. My friend was inside, and my stepsister and I were outside alone. It was a really intimate moment. I think something might have happened, except that I killed the mood when I told her that Darth Vader was our father and that I had to go face him. Story 8. It all started when I met this really attractive guy at a bar. He was about 2 years older than I. We hit it off right away, flirting the whole night. A week later, we ran into each other again, exchanged numbers, and soon after, we officially started dating. Things were going great. We got pretty close pretty fast, slept together a few times, and everyone was happy. One night, I went out with my dad and his soon-to-be fiancé. My dad had asked me for advice on a ring. They'd only been dating about 6 months. I really liked this woman, and she was super nice. I even called her mom in my head. It was during this night that I learned that if they got married, I would be gaining a stepbrother and stepsister. We already had 6 siblings in total. While we were out, this woman suddenly got super excited, almost carrying me to the bar like she was about to go wild or something. At first, I thought maybe she'd had a few too many drinks or wanted to do shots. But when we got inside, she told me she wanted me to meet her son. She taps a guy on the shoulder, and when he turns around, it's my frigging boyfriend. Best of all, she introduces us saying, "Meet your new brother," to me and "Meet your new sister" to him. We just stood there staring at each other, burst out laughing, and carried on drinking on our own. After our families moved in together, we did keep things going for a little while, but eventually decided to end it so our parents would have a real chance at making it work. Our reasoning was that our parents were older and might not find anyone else, while we were still young with our whole lives ahead of us. After that, my ex ended up falling in love with my then best friend, and I found someone else to fall for as well. Our parents eventually broke up because this woman turned out to be an absolute nightmare, Karen level 1000. And since then, my ex and I haven't seen or spoken to each other. Not sure if our parents knew exactly what was going on, but I have a feeling my dad suspected something, though he never said anything. On a happy note, it's been almost 7 years since all this happened. I'm now engaged to the guy I fell in love with after all this drama, and we have a beautiful little boy together. Story 9. So, my uncle married his stepsister when they were teenagers. They had 4 kids together, then eventually divorced. Fast forward a few years, and my dad ends up marrying that same woman, his own stepsister and his younger brother's ex-wife. Yeah, it was as messy as it sounds. Overnight, my cousins became my step-siblings. And since my uncle still lived just around the corner, things got awkward quickly. Her kids weren't thrilled about suddenly having their uncle as a stepfather, and my dad felt like she treated my sister and me like afterthoughts. My grandma was not a fan. She threatened to disown my dad more than once for marrying her. My dad and stepmom were only living together for about a year before things fell apart. She couldn't deal with his drinking anymore, and he was done putting up with what he felt was a lack of respect from her kids and unfair treatment toward my sister and me. We ended up moving out, but weirdly enough, they stayed legally married for over a decade after that. Ever since then, things with our cousins, who were also our former step-siblings, got pretty distant. My sister and I were kind of seen as the black sheep of the family, which sucked. I honestly used to love being around my cousins, and as a kid, I was around 10 or 11 when all this happened. I thought my aunt-turned-stepmom was really cool. Looking back now as an adult, I can't begin to imagine what my dad and his brother's ex were thinking getting together like that. The whole situation was just confusing. Story 10. Not me, but here's a wild one from my coworker. He got his nephew a job at our company to help him get back on track, even let him move in. A few months go by, and suddenly he's talking about how he's going to be a granddad. Turns out his 18-year-old daughter, who also lives at home, is pregnant. Well, we later found out the nephew had been hooking up with his daughter regularly, and yep, he was the baby's father. Nephew didn't even last 6 months on the job, failed a drug test, and got fired. Pretty sure he got kicked out of the house not long after, too. Story 11. I once hung out with these 2 lesbians who were dating. I'm a girl. They lived with one of their moms and the stepdad. They wanted me to hook up with them, so one night they were showing me an array of their toys. They had them all splayed out on the living room floor, and they were showing me this giant purple fake dong. We all hear the key turning in the lock, and the stepdad opens the door. He sees all these toys on the floor, walks towards them, picks up a purple fringe whip, and starts whipping. What does she do? She starts banging her girlfriend with the fake dong, while the stepdad continues with the whip. I didn't know whether I should turn away, or watch, or what was proper etiquette in the situation. Story 12. I had relations with my stepbrother a lot when we were younger and lived in the same house. That's how I lost my V card, actually. He's about 4 years older than me, and we're both guys. There was no aftermath. We stopped eventually and haven't brought it up since. He says he's straight, and maybe he is. Could have been a phase. I don't know. Sexuality changes over time. I think he's bisexual, though, but the people with whom he chooses to associate don't look kindly on that sort of thing. I'm gay and okay with it. I think that experience was actually an important outlet for me. But there was no aftermath. No one knows as far as I'm aware, and if they do, they don't care, and why would they? We're not related. Story 13. Not me, but my girlfriend when I was 18, who is also the girl that took my V card, told me she gave H-job and blowies to her older stepbrother. I never met the guy, and she never gave me any details about it, but it seemed like something they had kept secret. She had a kid shortly after we broke up, and the guy that knocked her up was a deadbeat, and the kid has autism. She had a second kid a few years later. I definitely dodged a bullet with her, I think. But I feel bad for her as well, because I think she had a rough upbringing and was kind of always doomed. Now, to wrap this story up, a few years later, I started working at a grain elevator owned by my stepdad's oldest and best friend. During harvest, we don't have time to cook or go out to lunch, so my boss hires someone to cook. I thought she looked familiar, but couldn't place it. Turns out it's my ex-girlfriend's mom, and here's the real kicker. We all suspect that my boss is banging the mom that cooks for us, and she could even be the reason he's getting a divorce now. So, it's possible that me and my boss are Generation Eskimo brothers. This is what happens when you live in a small town in Middle America, I guess. Story 14. I had a screwed-up relationship with my stepsister. About 10 years after our parents divorced, we ran into each other at a local watering hole. We caught up and made plans to go see a live band at a bar in the big town about 45 minutes away with one of the other sisters and a few other people. The plan was to get a room at the hotel next to the bar, so that nobody had to drink/drive back home. So, we had a good time, more catching up, talking about old good/bad times. But the others called it quits before me and her wanted to, so we took the extra room key and said we'd be quiet coming in. We sat alone and had a dance or two together. I didn't think too much of it, because I can be dim when it comes to women sometimes. She kisses me, and then I remember. Don't you have a boyfriend? She says. Yeah, but he's not here, and neither is anyone we know. I rolled with it, because I used to be a kind of scummy. Things escalated, and we decided to get a room of our own and tell the others that we couldn't remember which room they were in the morning. She was unbelievably hot, and we had the most animalistic session you can imagine, and that continued for a few months. But as I spent more time with her and her family, her kids got very attached to me. Their father had died a few years beforehand, and her boyfriend hadn't stepped up to be a father figure, a role they quickly assigned to me. I loved them as if they were my own, and she found that irresistible. She broke things off with her boyfriend and moved in with me. But as hard as things rose, they fell even harder. We argued all the time about the same things. She had to have a complete hysterectomy due to complications from her last pregnancy, so she couldn't have any more children and felt guilty about not being able to give me a child. I didn't, and still don't, want children of my own, but she wouldn't be convinced of that. After having that argument 10 too many times, I left. I packed my things in the back of my truck and took a very needed trip to see family out of state and did my college internship, and gave her a couple of months to move out of my house. Story 15. My mom dated a new guy when I was 13, and they got married when I was 18. He had a daughter my age. We hated each other for like 3 months after living together, enough where we had to go to family therapy. Well, my friend got his license first and drove me to school. Then I let her get a ride since it was just like 10 minutes in the car with her. One day, he asked if I wanted to skip, and she said she wanted to skip too, so we hung out and got high and went swimming. Our parents both worked till like 6 p.m., so we were able to go back home at like 1 p.m. He dropped us off, and she started talking about how she didn't know I smoked, and was cool letting her skip with me. Then she said her dad smoked, and she wanted us to go see if we could find his stash. We went into the bedroom and checked the drawers, and she found an unlabeled video. Of course, we both knew it was corn, but she wanted to check it out. Then, she asked if I had slept with anyone before. She did once, and I didn't. She then asked if I wanted to, and told me not to worry since she was on the pill. So we banged after class when our parents weren't home, which went on for like 2 months straight. Then she got a boyfriend, and we stopped. Then she told her boyfriend about us for some reason. And when they broke up, he told everyone at school that she banged her brother. I was expelled from school by then, but it got back to the parents, and my mom had a talk with her, and she admitted it to her, but decided not to tell her dad the truth. Anyway, her dad and my mom got divorced when I was like 20, so I haven't seen the girl in around 15 years. Pretty much my mom told me not to do it anymore because it could cause issues, and she doesn't want a baby in the house. We hadn't done anything for over 6 months, so I just agreed. Story 16. It didn't happen to me personally, but I had a front row seat to a total mess involving step-siblings. I was part of a group of 5 girls in high school, and one of our friends, let's call her was going through a big family change. Her dad had recently started dating a woman who had 3 sons. Things between the parents escalated quickly, and the families moved in together not long after. I had a bad feeling from the start, and even warned A about the youngest of the 3 sons. She brushed it off, but sure enough, it turned out she and that same brother had secretly started messing around while their parents were heading toward marriage. At first, nobody in our group knew, but eventually the truth came out. They broke it off shortly after, probably because they started to realize how serious their parents' relationship was getting. Then, a few months down the line, another girl from our group, we'll call her B, starts dating the same brother. She knew about his past with A, but decided to go ahead anyway. I was firmly against it the whole time, but nobody wanted to hear it. So, B and the brother are together for like 8 or 9 months. Meanwhile, A is trying to move on and starts dating someone new, but she is still affected by the whole situation. Over time, things start getting weird. A becomes distant, and the brother starts acting cold toward B. Then, out of the blue, the brother breaks up with B, and a week later, A dumps her boyfriend too. We got a call from some guy. The brother apparently owed a lot of money to. This guy was done waiting for repayment and decided to blow the whole situation open out of spite. He tells us that A and the brother never actually stopped. They had been seeing each other the entire time, cheating on their respective partners, all while their parents had gotten married and bought a house for the entire family to live in together. It was absolute chaos after that. A's dad nearly lost it when he found out. The brother had not only betrayed everyone emotionally, but had also stolen from the family. He took A's late mother's jewelry and pawned it to help pay off his debt. That was the final straw. The brother got kicked out soon after. To make matters worse, he later started dating another girl our age, one we ran into often. That didn't last either, but it was just more fuel to the fire. The rest of the family moved away for a couple of years, probably just to escape the mess and the gossip, but they eventually came back. Things were never really the same after all that. And as for the brother, he's been unemployed for over 6 years now. Last I heard, he got that girl he dated when she was 18 pregnant. Total. Story 17. Not my story, but my partner's ex-friend ended up hooking up with his aunt. They weren't biologically related, but the whole situation was messy. The aunt had known him since he was a baby, and he was super close with the uncle. They even worked together. Basically, at some point, the aunt and uncle were going through a rough patch, and during that time, she and the ex-friend got drunk, banged each other, and kept it a secret. What started as a one-time mistake turned into a regular thing. He was 21 at the time and apparently had other experiences, but the wild part is that he actually lost his V card to her. Eventually, the uncle decided he wanted to patch things up with the aunt, and that's when she confessed what had been going on, though probably left out the details. When the uncle found out who it was, he lost it. He called the workplace, threatening to off his nephew if not seriously him if he saw him. Co-workers gave the ex-friend a heads up, and he basically disappeared overnight. Obviously, he no longer have a relationship with the aunt or uncle. Story 18. I've had extreme bad luck with relationships for 6 years because of my stepsister. My fiancé knows my history but supports me anyway, despite my skewed image of relationships. My mother passed when I was 9. My father remarried when I was 12 so that I could have a mother figure in my life. Mother figure came with a stepsister who was 2 years older than me, and a stepbrother who was 2 years younger than me. We had fooled around before we were step-siblings, but as our parents met through a dating site, we hadn't known each other beforehand, and it was just a lot of job and blowies. When we moved in together, she and I got the rooms at the end of the house away from everyone else, and we banged nearly every night until we moved. After we moved, things slowed down a bit because we were in a bigger town and she could get some elsewhere. So I banged some of her friends she brought over, and she got jealous. She stopped bringing friends over, and we went back to sleeping together at almost every convenient opportunity. We moved 2 more times within the same city, and each time we found ways and times to do it. This continued for 5 years, even through 2 years of her marriage. After her husband died of natural causes, she moved back in with us. He had lots of health issues, and his passing surprised nobody. She was being incredibly manipulative about the banging situation. I quit my job and started college to get away from her with a valid reason, since she had no way to rationalize an hour drive to get some. Ever since I left most of that part of my life behind, I've struggled with meaningful relationships because I spent 5 years of my life as little more than a screw doll. Nearly nothing is new and exciting, nothing feels legitimate, and worst of all, nothing feels honest. I second-guess any female who ever displays any affection for me because 5 years of no affection while sleeping together kind of eroded my ability to develop meaningful attachments to people. The only person I've told this is my fiancée, because she makes me feel valid and heard, and she even went to the effort of asking me to marry her, knowing full well that I had a screwed-up past. Even now in my 20s, I still carry the emotional weight of that experience. It left me with an unusually high need for intimacy, not just physically, but emotionally too, and that's shaped how I approach relationships. In a couple of serious ones, where my partner had the same level of intensity, we'd do it around 5 to 6 times a day. Things would move fast, and I couldn't keep those bonds for long. But looking back, I realize I wasn't really able to separate my true self from the patterns I'd developed because of how my stepsister treated me. It was like I'd confused closeness with compulsion. Those relationships didn't last because I wasn't present in a healthy way. Story 19. My husband's brother secretly dated their stepsister for a while. For context, they became step-siblings when she was 10 and he was 13. They didn't start dating until she was 23. He was the only one who knew about it at first, and despite warning his brother that it was probably a bad idea, the relationship continued. Things came to light when she unexpectedly got pregnant, and they had no choice but to tell the family. Their mom was understandably upset and disappointed, but ultimately said she'd support them if they chose to stay together and raise the child. Their dad, on the other hand, was not okay with it at all. He pressured his daughter to end both the pregnancy and the relationship. They didn't listen. They stayed together, had the baby, and tried to make it work. But a few years down the line, things fell apart, both ended up cheating on each other, and eventually broke up. Now, family gatherings on my husband's side are tense, to say the least. Especially since everyone remembers how it all went down. Story 20. A while back, I was at my cousin's wedding, just a guest, not at the party. My extended family is small because, well, none of us have really been prolific breeders. My adopted cousin was dating a guy in the military who was deployed. I've had a crush on her forever, but she never seemed interested. After the wedding festivities, everyone was at a rented lake house drinking. She's out of her bridesmaid dress and wearing something fit for clubbing. She'd been talking about how lonely she felt since the rehearsal the day before, and I was just keeping her company to be nice, nothing weird. Then, after a few beers, she says how drunk she is, and grabs my hand and drags me down to the boathouse. She takes off her bridesmaid dress, reveals her chest, and tells me she just needs a man right now. I get her drift. I ask about her guy, and she said not to worry and just have fun. So here I was, with a girl I've crushed on forever, with her jugs out, practically inviting me my one chance to bang her. But I refused. I told her I won't play Jody to her fiancé. She got super mad and stormed off. Honestly, I wanted to do her so badly, but I stuck to my guns. Second story in the same wedding. My uncle's wife, who's from overseas, has a bunch of sisters, all there at the wedding. I hit it off with the youngest sister. Early 30s, petite, Asian Islander, with a surprisingly generous figure for her size. At the after-party, we got hammered. She stumbled up to me and asked for help, and next thing I knew, We were banging in someone's bedroom, didn't even bother getting fully undressed. Stupidly unprotected, but it was hot. We banged again at a family gathering 9 months later. We exchange spicy texts regularly and have agreed it's just for fun, though I wouldn't be opposed to something more serious. I see her a few times a year, and we keep things secret. I imagine if anyone found out, it would cause drama and heartbreak. Surprisingly, I would. Story 21. This all started when I was about 15. The timeline is a bit messy in my head, so bear with me. My dad was divorced, and I'd visit him during the summers. After a couple of years, he met someone new, a nice lady who was divorced too. She had 3 kids, including a red-headed daughter who was around 18. The first time I met her was at an amusement park. She had just messed up her haircut and was pretty annoying to me at the time. I was a typical moody teen. But a few weeks later, we ended up at a church event held at a water park. Weirdly, we were the only ones who showed up, so we spent the whole day together. Turns out she was pretty cool, and honestly, she was hard to ignore in a bathing suit. As the summer went on, I found her less annoying, and by the end of it, I was totally into her. I had no idea what to make of those feelings, and wasn't sure if she felt the same. On my last night before heading home, we were lying on the floor watching South Park, and out of nowhere, I somehow worked up the nerve to kiss her, and it was welcome. We ended up staying up all night just making out. Before flying home, I went on a trip to Arizona to visit my mom and her sister. My stepsister's flight connected through AZ, so I surprised her at the gate. We hung out a bit, but didn't talk much. She wasn't really into computers or social media, so the communication was rare. The next summer, I came out to visit again. Our parents had gotten married, and I was really conflicted about everything because my feelings were still so strong. We reconnected instantly and started intimate relationship. Deep down, I felt guilty, like we were doing something wrong. Halfway through the summer, I told her I couldn't keep going. We were both devastated. Things got messy after that. One day, we were supposed to go to church, and her brother moved her journal, and she totally flipped out. I thought it was weird, and when I came back home, I went and searched for it and found it. It talked about how he was shagging some dude when we were messing around. This was probably the first time I've had my heart broken, and I went home pissed. I was angry and crushed, and I shut down for weeks. She tried reaching out with emails and poems, but I deleted them all. Over the years, we dated other people but kept coming back to each other, trying to make it work. She seemed to have a lot of drama, and I caused a lot of drama in our relationship dating other women and still messing around with her. One time, while I was dating another girl, my stepsister came to visit. Pretty much we determined that it was best that we put an end to our relationship. It was late, and I told her she could sleep over. So, she ended up sleeping in my bed. Nothing happened. But my girlfriend showed up unexpectedly. It was a crazy situation. Another time while I was dating this girl, I went to the beach with my stepsister, and I got busted because I left a rubber wrapper in my car with a receipt. At this point I have to say, I was not a nice guy. I was actually a really crappy person. I wanted my cake, and to eat it too. My stepsister eventually stopped talking to me. Years later, our parents bought a new house. I came up to help paint, and she was there. We hadn't spoken for years, but the connection was still there. We started seeing each other again, even though I was still dating the other girl. When she found out, she demanded I tell my stepsister, so I did. She was devastated. That same night, she went to a party, met a guy, and started a long-term relationship. She got pregnant, and when she called to tell me, I was furious, thinking she'd ruined her life. We didn't talk for years after that. Her marriage eventually fell apart. The husband had PTSD from the military, and by then, she had 2 kids. We started dating again while they were divorcing, which was stressful. Meanwhile, our parents' marriage was falling apart too, partly because my dad apparently tried to make a move on her while my stepmom was away. That blew things up big time, and I ended up losing touch with my dad as their divorce progressed. I made plenty of mistakes during that time, and she took me back multiple times. She started nursing school, and I supported her while she worked full-time and cared for her kids. When she graduated, I even started thinking about marriage. But things got shaky when I found suspicious messages from a guy in her nursing class. I confronted her, and she promised to stop talking to him, but months later, I found out she was still texting him. I kicked her out. A few weeks later, I took her back. She wanted me to move in, but days before the move, she changed her mind. I was pissed but kept going. Around Christmas, she said she wanted to spend it alone. I went to a friend's place, kept texting her with no response, then tried her place. She'd changed the locks and was with the guy from nursing school. I was furious and tried to confront him, but thankfully didn't get violent. I left and didn't really talk to her after that. A few weeks later, I turned 30 and decided I needed to change. Looking back, I realized how destructive my cheating and our toxic relationship had been. I still think about her sometimes. We brought out both the best and worst in each other. But I don't want her in my life anymore. I wish her happiness, though. I'm still close with her mom, so our paths cross occasionally. She's now married to that guy from nursing school and has a kid with him. I'm a little disappointed for her, not because it's not me, but because I thought she deserved better. I'm 36 now and in a healthier, happier relationship. Story 22. Back when I was 18, my mom just started to date this new guy who had a daughter, 19, from another marriage. We got on really well, and even from the start, there was a lot of flirting, but we would never do it in front of our parents. One day on her dad's birthday, we were sitting on a hillside next to our house, a bit tipsy from some of the alcohol that we managed to sneak out. I was lying on my back when she moved over and began snogging my face off. We slept together later that evening. I remember a lot of the winter that year was us just waiting for our parents to leave for a date night, so we could just go at it. It was one of the happiest times of my life, until the wedding. The wedding itself, I believe, is the reason all this ended. Both our families seemed to be over the top with talking about how great a brother and sister we make, and combining this with the marriage itself made it feel more real this time and unnatural. She was always incredibly anxious about what would happen to her if her dad found out, and one night, a couple of days after the wedding, she told me that we should stop. I can only remember feeling numb. The difficulty of putting on a fake smile when trying to play happy family and act like nothing happened. I'm 29 now and have not been able to enjoy intimacy as much as I did then, which has affected all my relationships to date. I cannot replicate the forbidden intimacy, and I don't know how to solve it. Story 23. I had a relationship with my stepbrother, and he moved in with us when I was 18, and he was 19. A few months after he moved in, he started flirting with me big time. We went out one night to get out of the house with my mom's car, and things just sort of happened. We started hooking up at every opportunity. I was pretty sure my stepdad knew while it was going on, but he never said anything to either of us. A few of our friends knew and were pretty weirded out by it, but I think they eventually got used to it. We had a super physical and emotional relationship for like 6 months, then one day brought a girl home, and it was just over. I was devastated. It was so awful having no choice but to see them together when I was home and couldn't escape. I think that made the breakup so much harder. He graduated and moved out, and broke up with his new girlfriend. I went a little wild men wise, which helped me to finally move on. We hooked up a few more times when I was in college, but by that point, I knew that nothing would ever come out of it other than a good bang. A few years back, at a family gathering, we had to run out to get more ice, and while we were out, he propositioned me. I turned him down since I was dating my now husband, and I'm no cheater. But there honestly was a part of me that was tempted. Besides the crappy breakup, there were no long-term consequences. We never got caught, which looking back is super surprising. We used to sleep together all the time, all over the place, since we had access to each other pretty much 24/7. I don't regret any of it, but I do not go around and tell people about it. Story 24. Back when we were both in our teens, I knew this guy who had a serious crush on a girl his family was really close to. Their parents were friends through church and saw each other all the time. Tragically, the girl's parents passed away in a car accident, and it turned out that his parents had already agreed to take her in if anything like that ever happened. So she moved in with them, and his mom immediately started insisting he refer to her as his sister. Meanwhile, no one in his family had any clue, or just pretended not to notice, that he was absolutely smitten with her. What they definitely didn't know was that they'd started a full-blown secret relationship. I don't think anyone suspected it, because his parents would have absolutely lost it if they knew. I lost touch with them sometime in college, and to this day, I desperately want to know what ended up happening between the two of them. It genuinely drives me a little crazy wondering where they are now, and if they ever made it work. And a lot of people are asking why I haven't tried to look them up. Trust me, I have. But all I have is his name, and it's super common. We only hung out for a few years because our moms were work friends, and I don't remember what school he went to or what church they belonged to. I'm not even 100% sure I'm remembering the girl's name correctly. I thought about asking my mom, but bringing that up after 15 years would be weird, especially since they moved away not long after. I even tried searching for him online just now, but no luck. Sorry to disappoint. Story 25. Years ago, my dad remarried, and my new stepmom moved in with her daughter, who was the same age as me. We weren't exactly close, but living under the same roof definitely made things complicated. Nothing really happened back then aside from some awkward tension and a few flirtatious moments that never went far. Fast forward a few years, I had already moved out and came home for a visit. One night, while everyone else was asleep, we ended up spending some time together, and things escalated. That was actually my first time, though it definitely wasn't hers. We saw each other once more a few months later when she came to visit me, but that was pretty much the end of it. Not long after, she moved on with someone else who eventually became the father of her first kid. We never talked about it again. Things only got slightly weird when I started dating my first serious girlfriend, and my stepsister suddenly acted kind of jealous. That tension fizzled out after she and her mom had a falling out and stopped communicating with my dad altogether. As far as I know, our parents never found out about any of it. And just to address a wild rumor I've heard over the years, no, she was not in any adult videos. People love to talk, but that one's definitely false, even if the videos do exist. Story 26. About 10 years ago, my parents divorced. My mom remarried pretty quickly, but my dad stayed single for a while. About 2 years after the divorce, my dad decided to do some traveling. He went to Scotland to see the family castle and all that. That's where he met his new wife. Fast forward a year, and they're getting married. She emigrated to the US to be with my dad, but her 20-year-old daughter is still in college back in Scotland, so she stays there for a while. A year later, she finishes school and heads over to the US, but she overstays her visa. When I finally met her, I'm embarrassed to admit it, but I was smitten. She was a little taller than I, dark-haired, and really beautiful. There was an instant connection between us. Over the next few months, we flirted and went out under the excuse of her meeting new people here. Things happened between us. We were hooking up on and off, even while dating other people. Eventually, we tried to make a secret relationship work. 6 months in, we came up with a plan for her to move in as my new roommate, since she hadn't been able to find legit work due to her immigration status. Her mom was glad she'd have someone looking out for her in the city, and my dad was glad she wouldn't always be hanging around his house, which he felt was impeding his marital bliss. It was a big change. I'd been used to living alone, and now I had a roommate. On top of that, we didn't exactly see eye to eye on most things, but I was still head over heels for her. About a year later, through a series of unfortunate events, her visa situation was discovered at her workplace. Immigration got involved, and she was detained with a deportation order. I was shattered. The woman I loved was going to be taken away from me. Then it hit me, since we're not blood relatives, there's no law against step-siblings marrying in my state. She doesn't even have the same last name as her mom, so it wouldn't raise too many eyebrows. I told her my plan. We'd tell our parents it was just a green card marriage to keep her here. She told me she loved me but couldn't marry me. I begged her, "Why can't you marry me? We love each other. This is a win-win. What more do you need?" She looked down at me with these sad eyes and said, "I need about Trifidi." That's when I realized my girlfriend/stepsister was actually a 6-story monster from the Paleolithic era. Yep, the damned Loch Ness monster stole my heart. Story 27. My ex-stepbrother and I are dating and soon will be married. So, what happened is, our parents were married for about a year when we were children. They were still together off and on here and there after the divorce, and it resulted in me having 3 siblings who are my ex-stepdads/my mom's kids. They're not dating anymore as of about 10 years, or maybe even longer, but are very good at co-parenting and get along. I really hadn't seen my ex-stepbrother since a couple of years after his dad/my mom's divorce, because at that point he graduated high school and moved out and just never really came around. I'd probably see him once every year or so. He's worked with his dad at his shop since he could start working. I needed a job, and my ex-stepdad offered me one to come down to the shop where they worked, so I accepted, of course. That's when I fell in love. I worked around him all the time, so he was the person I talked to most on some days. Not to mention, when you work around someone all the time, you express your interests, and we had a lot in common and just clicked. When I turned 21, I went out to see him play in his band, and we ended up sleeping together. It was a wild ride from there, but we now have 2 kids, a house, and are planning to get married soon when we're out of debt. Hopefully, this wasn't confusing. Story 28. I married my step-niece, whom I've known since childhood, and we've been together ever since. After I got out of basic training, we reconnected and started dating seriously. About a year later, we found out we were expecting a child. We had already talked about getting married, and in February 2002, we tied the knot. We now have 2 amazing sons and have been happily married for 18 years. Now, how did it all come together? Here's the backstory. My mom divorced my biological father and eventually married my stepdad when I was around 4 or 5 years old. My stepdad had 9 children of his own, 5 daughters and 4 sons, while my mom brought my sister and me into the family. One of my stepsisters ended up marrying my future wife's father, who already had a daughter, my wife. Because of that connection, our families spent a lot of time together, and I grew close to her from an early age. As we grew older, that childhood bond developed into something more. By the time she was in her early teens and I was a few years older, we were dating seriously. After I returned from basic training, we reconnected again, and our relationship picked up where it left off. Meanwhile, things were complicated on the family side. Her father and my stepsister, who were married, ended up divorcing multiple times. Because of issues within that household, their children were eventually removed from their care. My mom and stepdad were granted temporary guardianship of those kids, leading to a long and difficult custody battle. During this time, my wife and I stayed out of the drama entirely. We didn't take sides, and that decision upset a lot of people in the family. A few months later, we found out we were expecting our first child. By that point, we were already committed to each other and planning to build a life together. Despite the complicated family ties and everything that happened around us, we've built something strong and lasting. Her father remained in our lives and has a good relationship with both of us. Story 29. This one's not me, but someone in my family whom I've remained distant from, for obvious reasons ahead. Also, I've changed the names for privacy reasons. My uncle Steve, my dad's younger brother, married a woman years and years ago. We'll call her Sharon. Steve and Sharon had, if I recall correctly, 5 kids: John, Jane, Fred, Karen, and Joe. The family had some issues because they were not remotely well off and had no real means to get ahead. Eventually, my uncle Steve and his wife Sharon divorced. Eventually, John found a woman, I don't remember her name, but we'll call her Beth. They started dating, eventually had kids. So my uncle Steve now has 5 kids and 3 grandkids. Moving on, Beth cheats on John with my uncle Steve. Steve slept with his daughter-in-law and gets her pregnant. John divorces Beth. Beth and Steve get married and end up having 3 kids. So body count: Steve, 5 kids with Sharon, 3 kids with Beth, 3 grandkids by Beth and John. John, 4 siblings, 3 kids with Beth, 3 half-siblings by Beth and his dad, Steve. So by now, you might have gotten the gist of why I don't talk to these people anymore. Story 30. I have a buddy whose married mom cheated with a younger guy, and my friend was the result. The guy she had an affair with eventually married someone else and had a daughter with her. Fast forward to adulthood, my buddy meets this woman, they fall in love, get married, and even have a child together. Tragically, their child passed away young, and a few years later his wife passed too. It was devastating. He mourned both losses deeply, but tried to move on with his life. Now here's where it gets dark. About 15 years after all this, his mom decides to come clean. She tells him that the man she had an affair with, his biological father, was also the father of his late wife. Meaning, his wife had been his half-sister the entire time. She knew from the start and never said a word, not even when they got married or had a child, because she didn't want to ruin her own marriage or deal with the fallout of her past decisions. Story 31. Our parents married when we were around 12. He always lived with his mom, and I bounced between my parents for long periods of times, so I only saw him in short bursts. We were buddies, but not close. Skip ahead, and in our late 20s we wound up living in the same state coincidentally. We became very close and helped each other through the nasty breakups we went through that led us to that state. Getting to know adult him was amazing, and I fell madly in love with him. I held back for a long time, even after I accidentally confessed my feelings one drunken night. He admitted he felt the same, but still, I kept my distance. It all just felt weird. And I knew it. We both moved on, started other relationships, tried to pretend nothing was there. They were both awful, if I'm being honest. Just placeholders, really. We were doing our best not to feel anything. Eventually, those relationships fell apart. And when they did, I was absolutely miserable. How could I be in love with my frigging stepbrother of all people? I was gutted. One day, I found myself alone in a room with my mom. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "I know you're in love with him. Be with him." I hesitated. "I can't," I told her. "Because of what people would say, because of society." She didn't even flinch. "Then screw society," she said. "Fast forward 10 years, we've got a solid marriage and some adorable kids. Our family is tight-knit, full of love, and always up for a good vacation. The people who knew us back then? They used to say, 'It's kinda weird, but honestly we get it now. You two are perfect together.' And you know what? It can work, even if it is frigging weird." Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.